At 2:45 a.m. on Monday, the 6th of August, 1945, three American B-29 bombers took off from an airfield on the Pacific island of Tinian, 1,500 miles south of Japan. Colonel Paul Tibbets piloted the lead bomber, nicknamed Enola Gay, which carried a nuclear bomb nicknamed Little Boy. Despite the bomb's nickname, it weighed 4,400 kilograms. As a result of the weight, the Enola Gay had to use more than 2 miles of runway to get off the ground. At 7:15, the bomber crew armed the bomb and the plane began its ascent to the bombing altitude of 31,000 feet. At 8:14, the Enola Gay arrived over the city of Hiroshima in Japan. Just after 8:15, Little Boy was released from the plane. It fell almost 6 miles in 43 seconds before detonating at an altitude of 2,000 feet. The bomb exploded with the force of more than 15,000 tons of TNT directly over a surgical clinic. Less than 2% of the bomb's uranium achieved fission, but the resulting reaction engulfed the city in a blinding flash of heat and light. The temperature at ground level reached 3,900 degrees Celsius in less than a second. The bomb vaporized people half a mile away from the ground zero. Bronze statues melted, roof tiles fused together, and the exposed skin of people miles away burned from the intense infrared energy unleashed. At least 80,000 people died instantly. Around 8:15 that same morning, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a 29-year-old naval engineer, was walking to Mitsubishi's shipyard when he heard the drone of an aircraft overhead. Looking skyward, he saw an American B-29 bomber soar over the city and drop a small object connected to a parachute. The sky erupted in a blaze of light. He had just enough time to dive in a ditch before an ear-splitting boom rang out. The shockwave that accompanied it sucked him from the ground, spun him in the air like a tornado, and sent him hurtling into a nearby potato patch. It had been less than 2 miles from ground zero. He wandered in a daze towards what remained of the Mitsubishi shipyard. There he found his co-workers, Akira Awanaga and Kaneyoshi Sato, both whom survived the blast. After spending a restless night in an air raid shelter, the men awoke on August the 7th and made their way toward the train station, which they heard was somehow still operating. The journey to the station took them through a nightmarish landscape of still flickering fires, shattered buildings, and charred and melted corpses lining the streets. Many of the city's bridges had turned into twisted wreckage, and at one river crossing, Yamaguchi was forced to swim through a layer of floating dead bodies. Upon reaching the station, he boarded a train full of burned and bewildered passengers and settled in for the overnight ride to his hometown of Nagasaki. He arrived at Nagasaki early in the morning on August the 8th and limped to the hospital. The doctor who treated him was a former classmate, but the blackened burns on his hands and face were so severe the man didn't recognize him at first. Neither did his wife Hisako and their infant son, Katsutoshi. Early on the morning of August the 9th, 1945, B-29, known as Boxcar, took off from Tinian Island in the Western Pacific Ocean carrying the 4,500 kilogram plutonium-based bomb known as Fat Man towards Kokura, home to a large Japanese arsenal. Finding Kokura obscured by cloud, the Boxcar's crew decided to head to their secondary target, Nagasaki. Meanwhile, in Nagasaki, and despite being on the verge of collapse, Yamaguchi dragged himself out of bed on the morning of August the 9th and reported for work at Mitsubishi's Nagasaki office. Around 11 a.m., he found himself in a meeting with the company director, who demanded a full report on Hiroshima. Yamaguchi recounted the events of August the 6th, the blinding light, the deafening boom, but his superior accused him of being mad. How could a single bomb destroy an entire city? He was trying to explain himself when the landscape outside suddenly exploded with a blinding light. He dropped to the ground just seconds before the shockwave shattered his office windows. and sent broken glass and debris through the room. His bandages were blown off, and he was hit by yet another surge of cancer-causing radiation, but he remained relatively unhurt. For the second time in 3 days, he'd had the misfortune of being within 2 miles of a nuclear explosion, and, for the second time, he'd been fortunate enough to survive. After fleeing from the devastated Mitsubishi building, he rushed through a bomb-ravaged Nagasaki to check on his wife and son. He feared the worst when he saw a section of his house had been reduced to rubble, but he soon found them. They both had sustained only superficial injuries. His wife had been out looking for burn ointment for her husband when the explosion came, and she and the baby had taken refuge in a tunnel. It was yet another strange twist of fate. If Yamaguchi hadn't been hurt at Hiroshima, his family might have been killed at Nagasaki. In the days that followed, his double dose of radiation he was exposed to took its toll. His hair fell out, the wounds on his arms turned gangrenous, and he began vomiting incessantly. Yet, unlike so many victims of radiation exposure, he slowly recovered and went on to live a relatively normal life. He served as a translator for the US Armed Forces during their occupation of Japan, and later became a school teacher, before resuming his engineering career at Mitsubishi. He and his wife had 2 more children in the 1950s, both of them girls. Although Yamaguchi lived a long and relatively healthy life, he suffered from radiation-related ailments including cataracts and acute leukemia in his later years. All of their children suffered with health problems. His son died of cancer in 2005, aged 59, and his wife in 2008 from kidney and liver cancer, aged 88. Yamaguchi dealt with the horrific memories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by writing tanka, a form of poetry, which was published in a book called "And the River Flowed as a Raft of Corpses," a reference to the bodies he had to swim through in Hiroshima. He avoided discussing his experiences publicly until the 2000s, when he released a memoir and became part of the anti-atomic weapons movement. In 2006, he travelled to New York and spoke about nuclear disarmament before the United Nations. He died of stomach cancer on January 4th, 2010, at the age of 93. A few months before his death, he said he was lucky to survive both atomic blasts, so everything that follows is a blessing. He believed he was spared for a reason, saying, "Having experienced atomic bombings twice and survived, it is my destiny to talk about it." He is the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as Niju Hibakusha, or twice bombed person. This is one of his poems. In it, the bodies of the dead are referred to as they. Thank you for listening.